The story begins with a boy named Thomas, who lives with his family in a dense forest. He and his father work in the forest herding animals. His family also includes his elderly grandfather and younger sister. Thomas's mother had passed away long ago when he was still a child. Thomas had grown up in the forest since childhood. Because of this, he had developed a unique ability to understand the language of animals. He could sense their emotions through their gestures and sounds. One day, while the whole family was having a meal, a horse suddenly became restless and started stomping its feet. From the sound, Thomas immediately understood that the horse was in pain. He quietly went to the horse and carefully removed a piece of glass stuck in its hoof. Then he went to his father and said that he could tell just by the sound whether an animal was happy or sad. After this, Thomas is shown wandering in the forest, where he hears the cries of baby hawks coming from a nest. He quickly reaches there and gives them something to eat. Just then, a black crow comes swooping down to attack the little ones. Thomas immediately picks up a stone and throws it at the crow, scaring it away. Thomas then continues deeper into the forest. While walking, he spots a hunter named Vagan, who was trying to trap a large hawk in a net. Thomas whistles, alerting the hawk, which quickly flies away and escapes the trap. The hunter Vagan is left with nothing, and his net remains empty. At night, Thomas's father tells him that the king's cruelty is increasing day by day. Then his grandfather tells Thomas that tomorrow is Princess Fermina's birthday. He also says that the princess is 2 years older than Thomas, and both of them were born on the same date. Then the grandfather begins telling him a story, saying that once the king got stuck in a swamp, and just then a hawk came and saved his life. In return for this favor, the king placed a royal seal around the hawk's neck, and now he is searching for that very hawk. As a birthday gift, Thomas's father gives him a leather whip. Just then, terrifying howls of wolves are heard from a distance. Within moments, the wolves attack their horses. Thomas's father rushes to drive them away, but the wolves turn on him and attack, killing him on the spot. Thomas is devastated by his father's sudden death and sits down, weeping bitterly. The next day, Thomas goes to his grandfather and says with sorrow that all the domestic animals they own will now come under the king's control. The king will send another shepherd to take care of them, and they will be left with nothing, forced to live by begging. The fear and helplessness in his eyes were clearly visible. So Thomas and his grandfather decide to go to the palace and meet the king to ask for a small piece of land to live on. On the other hand, the story shows the king, who was extremely fond of keeping animals and hunting. The king had a dog named Perron, who was extremely cunning and dangerous. Whenever someone came before him, the dog would kill them within moments. The king had entrusted the care of his animals to a soldier named Ivor. One day they unleashed the dog on a prisoner, and within moments the dog brutally injures the man. The soldiers and courtiers merely watch the scene unfold, while the prisoner screams in pain, and the dog continues to attack him relentlessly. The king then tells his daughter, Fermina, that on the occasion of her birthday, her engagement has been fixed with Prince Ostrich of the neighboring kingdom. The king further says that the engagement will take place on the day of her birthday itself. After that, he shows his daughter the animals imprisoned in the palace, as if it were just another hobby of his. The next day, Thomas and his grandfather arrive at the palace. But since they have no gift, the guards stop them from entering. Just then, Thomas gets an idea. He and his grandfather sneak into the palace by hiding behind a cart. Inside the cart, Thomas notices a small mouse crouched in a corner. He gently picks it up and keeps it with him as he moves forward. A little farther inside, Thomas sees the same criminal, Ludwig, who had been imprisoned and was still lying there. Just then, Thomas's grandfather arrives and takes him away from there. As they move ahead, they encounter a soldier named Ivor. Ivor allows Thomas's grandfather to enter the palace, but tells Thomas to stay outside. At that moment, Thomas sees Ludwig being sentenced to 20 lashes. Seeing this, Thomas comes up with a trick. He releases the mouse he was carrying onto the executioner. Because of the mouse, chaos breaks out, and in the confusion, Ludwig manages to escape. While standing there, Thomas begins to feel very hungry. He approaches a man and asks for something to eat. The man smiles and says that he will give him food when the church bell rings. Thomas looks around, then picks up a stone from the ground and throws it forcefully at the distant church bell. As soon as the stone hits, the bell rings. The man is impressed by Thomas's cleverness and gives him a piece of bread to eat. At that very moment, Prince Ostrich is entering the palace to get engaged to Formina. The noise and bustle in the palace begin to grow. Thomas stops near a cart filled with mud, which a man is pulling along. Thomas asks him what the use of this mud is. The man, tired, replies that he himself doesn't know what it's used for. He just knows the king orders it and uses it for something. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ivor and his companion stop Thomas's grandfather and try to rob him. But when they open his bundle, they find not a single coin inside. Left with no choice, they allow Thomas's grandfather to proceed into the palace to meet the king. That man then tells Thomas that the mud is used to cure physical ailments. Just then, a soldier accidentally sets fire to the nearby hay. As the fire breaks out, the cart horse gets frightened and bolts uncontrollably. In the chaos, Thomas slips and falls into the mud, and the horse, along with the cart, rushes toward the palace. The horse runs straight to the area where the king, queen, and all the courtiers are enjoying the birthday feast. Suddenly, the cart overturns, spilling both the mud and Thomas onto the ground. The mud spreads everywhere, causing panic in the palace. Thomas spots Princess Formina sitting in front of him. He smiles and wishes her a happy birthday, then says that it's his birthday too. Princess Formina laughs at Thomas's words and wishes him a happy birthday as well. Then, to everyone's surprise, she begins dancing with Thomas in the mud. The guests look on in shock. Just then, the king steps forward in anger, grabs Thomas, and sternly asks who he is and why he came here. Thomas, unafraid, tells the king that his father died just yesterday, and he has come to request a small piece of land so his family can survive through farming. The king becomes furious at his actions and is about to announce a punishment when Princess Formina steps in. She pleads with her father, saying that Thomas is not at fault. Listening to the princess, the king softens a bit and agrees to grant Thomas a small piece of land. Overjoyed, Thomas runs to his grandfather and tells him that the king has accepted their request and they will now have a piece of land. Hearing this, his grandfather breathes a sigh of relief. The next day, Thomas is wandering through the forest. As he moves between the trees, he hears the whispering of the wind. Just then, Ludwig appears before him in an injured state. Before Thomas can make sense of anything, Ivor arrives with his soldiers and the ferocious dog named Perron. Ivor asks Thomas if Ludwig has come this way, but Thomas denies it, saying no one has been here. Hearing this, Ivor becomes furious and unleashes his dog Perron on Thomas. But Thomas, without any fear, calms the dog using only his eyes and hand gestures. The terrifying dog becomes still within seconds, behaving like a soaked, harmless kitten. Seeing this, Ivor is stunned and immediately returns to the palace to inform the king of everything. The moment the king hears it, he bursts into anger. He orders Ivor to find Thomas and bring him to the palace at once. That same night, Thomas becomes restless. A fear takes hold of him that the king might harm his family. Without telling anyone, he quietly takes a horse and leaves home. A while later, soldiers arrive at his house, intending to capture him. But when they peek inside, Thomas is nowhere to be found. Helpless, they return empty-handed and head into the forest to search for him. Meanwhile, Thomas, hungry and thirsty, is wandering through the forest. His body begins to stumble from exhaustion and weakness. Just then, his foot gets caught in a trap. It was set by the hunter Vagan, who was lurking nearby. Vagan captures Thomas and asks him why he is wandering alone in the forest. Thomas softly explains that he ran away out of fear of the king and is now hiding here. Vagan understands his condition and words, frees him from the trap, and decides to take him to his home. On the way, Vagan tells Thomas that he too is angry with the king because the king had accused him of being too old and expelled him from the palace, claiming he could no longer train birds like hawks. When they reach home, a dwarf suddenly attacks Thomas, mistaking him for a thief who entered the house without permission. Vagan then explains that the dwarf used to beg in the city, and out of pity he gave him shelter in his home. He's a bit mentally unstable and attacks out of fear. Thomas also meets Ludwig there, who had taken refuge in Vagan's house while hiding from the king. Just as the four of them sit down to eat, soldiers arrive at Vagan's house in search of Thomas. Acting quickly, Vagan hides Ludwig and Thomas in a corner of the house and opens the door. The soldiers peek inside and ask Vagan if any new person has come there. Vagan calmly replies that only he and the dwarf live there. But then the soldiers notice 4 plates on the table. Suspiciously, they ask Vagan who the 2 extra plates are for. Without hesitation, Vagan answers that the 2 plates are for a fox and a stork. The soldiers are stunned at first, but then burst into laughter and leave. Vagan's cleverness works, and Thomas and Ludwig are saved. The next day, while wandering alone in the forest, Thomas suddenly sees Prince Ostrich and Princess Fermina secretly meeting each other. Both of them appear lost in each other. Seeing this, Thomas feels a burning pain in his heart, as he had slowly begun to fall in love with the princess too. Filled with jealousy, he hides nearby and decides he will talk to Fermina. A little later, when the princess is returning to the palace alone, Thomas steps in front of her. A bit hesitantly, he says that their birthdays fall on the same day, and there's only a few years difference between them. Then, speaking straight from the heart, he confesses that he loves Fermina and wants to marry her. Fermina is a little surprised, but smiling gently, she tells him that she already truly loves Prince Ostrich, and that Thomas is still very young. But as she leaves, Fermina places a chain necklace around Thomas's neck and walks toward the palace with a hint of sadness. Thomas feels heartbroken, but returns to the hunter Vagan. There he sees the hunter trying to teach a hawk to fly, but the hawk keeps falling again and again. The hunter, exhausted and frustrated, is on the verge of giving up. Just then, Thomas steps forward and makes a strange, mysterious sound. Hearing it, the hawk flutters its wings and soars into the sky. The hunter is astonished, because this was the same hawk he had failed to train. Witnessing Thomas's gift, a spark of hope ignites in his heart. He thinks that now he can present the hawk to the king and regain his lost honor. With this thought, the hunter places the hawk in a cage and prepares to take it to the palace. Meanwhile, at the palace, Thomas's grandfather is pleading with the king to forgive Thomas. But the king, still angry over Thomas's actions, sternly rejects his request. Just then, the hunter arrives at the palace with the hawk. Seeing the hawk, the king's face lights up, and he tells the hunter that the bird's skill will be demonstrated after lunch. But out of everyone's sight, Ivor, angry at the hunter's return, hatches a deadly plan. He laces a piece of bread with poison meant for killing rats and secretly places it inside the hawk's cage. Meanwhile, the hunter, unaware of the sabotage, lies down to rest. Later, when the hunter and the king go into the forest to demonstrate the hawk's flight, the poison begins to take effect. The hawk flutters its wings restlessly and within moments falls to the ground and dies. Seeing this, the king's face turns red with rage. He publicly humiliates the hunter and accuses him of betrayal. Furious, he pushes the hunter out of the palace. As the hunter, deeply humiliated, is walking away, he spots Princess Fermina in the corridor. The hunter quickly approaches her and quietly tells her that Thomas is alive and still hiding with him in the forest. Fermina is slightly surprised to hear this, but says nothing. Meanwhile, Thomas is wandering through the forest when suddenly a hawk swoops down and grabs him in its talons, carrying him toward its nest. There, Thomas sees Ivor trying to steal the hawk's eggs. Filled with rage, Thomas picks up a nearby stone and hurls it forcefully at Ivor. The stone hits Ivor directly, and he tumbles down from the nest. But after falling, Ivor angrily gets up and knocks Thomas unconscious with a single blow. Ivor tries to carry Thomas away, but just then, the hunter arrives. He grabs Ivor and shouts that he knows everything, that it was Ivor who poisoned his hawk, causing its death. Enraged, the hunter snatches the hawk eggs from Ivor and drives him away. At that very moment, the same hawk appears, flying overhead, the one with the king's royal seal hanging from its neck. The hunter revives Thomas and says, "Look, this is your chance. If you capture this hawk and take it to the king, he'll be pleased and forgive you." Meanwhile, as Prince Ostrich is leading his wedding procession toward the palace, he suddenly halts and tells his soldiers that he has an urgent matter to attend to. He has a feeling that perhaps Princess Fermina is calling him into the forest. As he walks deeper alone, Ivor, lying in wait, suddenly attacks and captures the prince. He drags him into a deep dark cave, where he removes the bracelet from the prince's ankle. Then, picking up a large rock, he smashes it onto the prince's leg, injuring him badly. After that, Ivor seals the cave entrance by stacking heavy stones and wooden logs, ensuring the prince cannot escape. He then rushes toward the palace with the prince's bracelet. Meanwhile, when the prince doesn't arrive at the palace, panic spreads. The king, worried, sends all his soldiers into the forest, commanding them to find the prince at any cost. Ivor arrives at the hunter's house with soldiers. He takes out the prince's bracelet and loudly proclaims, "These are the ones who captured and murdered the prince." Without thinking or questioning, the soldiers arrest the hunter, Thomas, Ludwig, and the dwarf. Back in the cave, the prince slowly regains consciousness. Groaning in pain, he begins to drag his injured leg toward a narrow exit at the other end of the cave, hoping to somehow escape. At the palace, Ivor presents all 4 captives before the king and shows the bracelet in front of everyone, declaring that these people together have killed the prince. Enraged, the king angrily orders that all 4 be hanged at the gallows the next morning. At night, Thomas sits bound inside the prison cell when he notices a small mouse nearby. In a soft voice, he calls out to it. The mouse quickly scurries over and begins gnawing through the ropes, binding Thomas's hands. Just then, Princess Formina arrives. She looks at Thomas with questioning eyes, wanting to know if they truly killed the prince. In a frightened voice, Thomas says they didn't do anything, that it's all part of Ivor's scheme. The princess believes Thomas's words and quickly uses a whip to help him escape from the cell. Without wasting a moment, Thomas runs toward the forest. In the forest, he encounters the same hawk who had helped him before. Thomas pleads with the hawk to find the prince. The hawk immediately soars high into the sky and within moments locates the prince inside the cave. It then guides Thomas through the air to the prince's location. As they reach the cave, Thomas limps toward the prince, and the two, supporting each other, begin their journey back to the palace. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king has already ordered the execution of the hunter and Ludwig. The soldiers tighten the ropes, and the crowd gathers to witness the punishment. On the other hand, Thomas realizes they won't make it in time, and that the innocent men may be executed before they can prove the truth. So Thomas removes the bracelet tied to the prince's other leg and fastens it around the hawk's neck. He signals the hawk to fly high, and the bird immediately takes off toward the palace at great speed. At that very moment, just as the king is about to give the final order for the execution, the hawk arrives and drops the prince's bracelet in front of everyone. Recognizing the bracelet, the king instantly orders the execution to stop. Moments later, Thomas and the injured prince arrive at the palace. The prince then reveals the truth before everyone, that it was Ivor who conspired to imprison him in the cave, not Thomas. With Ivor's treachery exposed, the king orders his capture and sentences him to death for his crime. The king feels deep remorse for his actions. In front of everyone, he falls at the feet of the hunter and Thomas and begs for forgiveness. Tears well up in his eyes as he promises that from now on, there will be no mistakes in justice. And with that, the story reaches its happy ending. I'm just a hardworking creator, trying my best, pouring my heart and soul into every video. If you found even a little bit of value or joy in my work, please consider subscribing to my channel. That one small subscription means the world to me and gives me the strength to keep creating. I'd be so grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.